Rory, whose chin bone have you got around your neck there?
Oh, for real, this is the jawbone of a roe deer, which a friend of mine actually like found in the wild, the carcass, and then like their whole thing is finding carcasses and then like burying them and like letting them just decompose and stuff, then digging them up and cleaning them and that whole thing. So I have a few weird things. Bracken absolutely hates it. They absolutely despise it. I keep it in a special drawer where they don't have to look at it.
A special box for special occasions.
Yeah, there's another one that's a fox baculum, which is the like penis bone. Yeah, they hate that one like extra hard.
Yeah, why do you want a fox stick? I mean, I guess why wouldn't you? But that
exactly.
It's virility. I don't know, maybe.
That's fair. Everything is a fertility. Like,
it's to intimidate any foxes I run into. It's like a flick.
Has anyone read How to Be Human, which is actually about a woman making friends with a fox?
No. When did you hear about that?
Just reminded me of it. It's kind of, it's interesting. It's not like cuddly, like it's sort of set in the real world. So it's, but it is very interesting and like a good.
Is it like a science kind of documentary book, as in this person actually tried to make friends with the fox?
No, it's like it's sort of a fictional story about the woman who makes friends with the fox that comes to the garden and like, or at least sort of invites it into her life and like home and stuff. So hi Lisa, Jonas and Ash. Hi Bracken.
Hey Bracken.
Yeah.
Goodbye Lisa, Jonas and Ash.
Oh
maybe connection issues.
Maybe. How are you, Bina?
I am all right. I have been off work today. So
ooh, that's good.
Nice.
What have you been doing today?
I had a Katie hug this morning, which technically wasn't allowed because we were in a public space and not in a private space. And hugs in gardens are allowed in Scotland and hugs on the street are not allowed.
What? How weird.
Okay. Yeah. Social distancing still applies everywhere except your own like private property, basically. Okay. Anyway, but we went to pole fitness as
great.
Thursday morning thing.
Hello.
You're outside.
Oh.
Hi.
Oh.
So nice. Yeah. So I had a Katie hug. That was very nice.
That sounds so lovely. Katie does give top-notch hugs.
Such a good hug. And then I got my fringe trimmed, so I'm not a fringe pony anymore. I can still see, which is good.
I was literally staring at you trying to figure out if something was different.
And then I had a bath in the afternoon with a beer. Read a book.
Oh, yes.
So good. Where are you adventuring, Lisa, Jonas, and Ash? No, they're not.
Oh, gone again.
Sad times. Hi, Secret Mike.
There's a secret Fiona.
Yes, there is. I am here because fucking love me some Beowulf. All up for sexy Angelina Jolie, who I 100% expect to show up here.
Mm-hmm.
Was Angelina Jolie in that really bad film, wasn't it?
It was, yeah, with the weird CGI high heel feet.
Yes, I'm obsessed with those.
That is the only film I've ever walked out of at the cinema.
Oh my god.
Like, I was there with a boyfriend and we were both like, we didn't get a lot, we lived in different places. And I think it was like maybe my last bit of time before I had to leave and go home for a while. And we were both like, is this film worth like spending the next 2 hours watching it when we could just be hanging out? And we decided it wasn't.
This isn't Cats you're talking about, is it?
No, it's the Angelina Jolie version of Beowulf.
The one with the really weird CGI?
Yeah.
So yeah, so she, for some reason, the character design, Beowulf's mother, she played Beowulf's mother, who was like a monster, and in this version she was like a kind of temptress siren. Exactly. And so she had like, so she needed to have sexy high heel, like stiletto high heels, except obviously it was set in the 9th century. So instead she had like weird feet that were shaped like high heels. But then to top it off, she spent most of her time wading around in a rock pool anyway. So
Oh,
there was like,
that is my energy though.
yeah.
Also, yeah, speaking of which, Rory, I think one of us is going to have to change for next week.
Oh my God.
Oh shit. I was just thinking as I put this on, like, oh man, I look like Fiona's Priss outfit for that One Iron Blues.
I love it. Yeah, I was like, I'm here for Grendel's mother, but I do also, on reflection, feel slightly like the woman who wears white to someone else's wedding.
No, it's a fucking power. Love it. I love it. Can I see those antlers? They look awesome.
Absolutely. Here you go.
Oh, those are fucking cool.
They're very
gonna-
cute.
I'm gonna spotlight you so everyone can appreciate your antlers.
Oh, it's a bit
Look
weird
at
to
how-
keep my face.
Mhm.
We don't have to do it forever, but that way we can all appreciate you for a second. Okay, thank you for showing off your antlers. You can stop
You're
looking at your face now if you want to.
But is it so pretty?
Very
What was
pretty
that?
face. Your face. Lisa was saying it was pretty.
Thank you. I feel like I maybe applied a drag beard blind, but it's on my face now and I'm not changing it.
It works. It's solid.
It's a thing of gorgeousness.
Mhm.
Thank you.
And if gorgeousness is mildly androgynous, that does not make it any less gorgeous.
Maybe the only distinguishing thing that they were like, oh, Grendel's mother must be a horrible monster. She just doesn't shave. That's it. They were like, oh, this horrifying visage. Yeah.
I cannot handle this woman with body hair, my fragile masculine eyes.
Exactly. And they'd have some weird like kerning, like compound word metaphor for it that would be like, oh, her face snakes. No, that's just a Medusa. Shit. Never mind. Anyway, jazz. Story time. Okay, everybody. We now return to the Maria Devana Headley translation of Beowulf, which is especially rad because of its depiction of Grendel's mother. Just by way of catch-up, previously on Beowulf, King Hrothgar was a very wealthy king who spent all of his wealth on erecting an enormous golden mead hall, the wonder of the world, and then a local monster, Grendel, moved in and killed anyone who stayed the night there. And so this like brought great shame and dishonor to King Hrothgar, but Beowulf came along from across the sea with his warriors and said, don't you even worry about it. I'll kill that guy for you. And they went, but how will you kill him? His skin is impervious to bladed weapons. And he's like, all right, then I'll just fuck him up. And so he did, and grabbed him, like grappled Grendel, and then literally ripped one of his arms off at the shoulder. And we now return to Beowulf holding that arm aloft as Grendel slinks away into the fens. Bro, I've heard when dawn broke, soldiers stampeded to the ring hall, chieftains coming to contemplate the cooling corpse portion, warriors and wild men from all over the realm, wide-eyed with wonder, overwhelmed at the sight of Grendel's tracks in the dirt. No sorrow there for those who'd suffered him, but satisfaction at the marks of misery where he'd conveyed himself from hall door to mere shore, bleeding out. He'd left a river of gore, and the warriors had no regrets, imagining him dropping a doomed carcass into those wicked waters, which even now were blood-clotted scarlet drifts. Oh, the gift of this, that devil diver deep in the dark, dimmer and dimmer yet, dying, dead. Here was the truth, everyone knew it. Grendel was headed down, hell-bent. And off they went, the elderly officers and the young men behind them, all mounted, white men on white horses, praising their heaven-sent hero Beowulf with every word they spoke. Not north, nor south, nor anywhere, they said, was there a man more qualified to be king. There was a lot of country between the coasts, a lot of open air beneath the sky, and even there, nope, no one better to rule. Of course, this unfettered praise wasn't meant to blame Hrothgar for anything. No, that was a good king. They were giddy enough to gallop for the first time in years, pale horses racing on trails long unused, though famous once for being smooth. And a poet, a long-term comrade of the king, a man mindful of meter, with a memory made of myriad myths, began to compose the tale of Beowulf, his enviable exploits and Geatish feats, the sentences rhyming rapturously, since now the man was elite enough for permanence. The Shop had opinions, and he'd shared them, compare, contrast, stories he'd heard from another warrior, Sigmund, verses detailing that man's hidden past, stealthy acts, dark secrets spat only into his kinsman's ear. The world roaming of Wales' defiant air, all those old tales whispered to Fitla from uncle to nephew, who together slain giants, their swords strong as their certainties. After he died, Sigmund was shaped into story glory for his crowning kill, cutting through the hide of a hoard holder, a dragon whose cave he crawled inside, outrageously alone, without even Fitla. He was fortunate in his fortune hunting. His sword stabbed the serpent and sliced it like butter, straight through scale to stone, and the dragon died, leaving bounty and bones to Whale's son, who claimed the treasure for himself. He loaded his ship with glitter. The dragon, even dead, was so embittered it melted, smelting dark intention into the metal. In these days, everyone knows Sigmund's name, the most famous exile. Far and wide he swung his sword, and his fortune swelled in the years after King Heremod lost his way. That king was attacked and betrayed, stung in Jutland, ultimately undone. His mood swings had mauled his men, emboldened his foes, and fractured his friends. Senility was suspected, and his advisors sorrowed, those who'd relied on him to think clearly, those who trusted the inheritor of the throne to behave as his daddy had, reigning righteously, paying promptly, shielding the shielding safety. Beowulf is surely such a man, adored by friends and men and every living thing, but other kings have hoarded horrors in their hearts. While the Shop spun, Danes and Geats raced, harrowing the highway with hooves. The sunlight was brighter and brighter, and young men herded themselves to Heorot, to gape at the gory glory therein. The king himself, hoary, hallowed hoard holder, ring bringer, came boldly from out of the women's way, good man incarnate, flanked by ranks of ladies, his queen beside him, and paced a path from maid hall to mead hall. Hrothgar stood on the stairs, staring at the ceiling he'd commissioned. Amid gold and gleam hung Grendel's attrition, a lacerated limb. First and most fervent, we give thanks to that ever-bearer for this sight. Our long struggle cleared in a single night. We've suffered years of whole harvesting here, but hard times are done at last. God is good, Grendel is gone. Only yesterday I thought my heart would never be mended. The evening rending endless, this house of heroes red rouged, my council risking life and limb to bed down in their home hall and defend this place from demons, yet every morning dozens dead. Now, with an almighty assist, this man has done what no man did before. His mother, I forget who she is she still alive? Should be proud of her prince and answer to prayers. Beowulf, regardless of whether your parents survive, you're my son now. Adoption won by wily work. Be good to me, I'll be good to you, I always say. You'll need nothing in life, boy. I'll feed you, fate you, and count you as my foundling. You're a king to be. I've decorated countless others, treated lesser warriors as brothers, and rewarded the inferior for fearlessness or what passed for then. Now, though, my standards have shifted. You're more than a man, but an immortal. Your valor in this hall will live in legend. I implore the Lord to keep you, my ward, in his grace and wield his power on your behalf. Beowulf, Edgethill's son, replied, We're lucky to be living, having gone into battle with only bright intentions, against a stranger whose might we hadn't measured. I wish you'd been awake to watch me bring war to your enemy, to see him beaten, but it was not to be. I meant to put him in a headlock, lash him to his deathbed, and bludgeon him, clench my fists around his throat, strangle till he gasped his last, but alas, the Lord set him free. What can I say? He slithered from my fingers like a serpent and slipped my knots, screeching for the exit. He paid his passage in pulses, though, and left a limb behind, holding the door, his hand, arm, and shoulder. There they stayed, proof of his incursion, much as he regretted it. Behold, nothing could live limited like that. The last of his blood must have boiled by now, braiding itself about his body, chaining him in coils of pain. He's dying now, if not already dead, a sinner awaiting sentence. God, not me, will judge him. Previously prone to calling bullshit, Unferth, Eglaf's son, was stymied as the roomful of nobles took note of the horrible hand, hanging whole, armpit to fingertips, high in the eaves. The nails were notorious, hard as though smith-forged, and the heathen's hand was calloused as a carpenter's, weathered by work and warring. Everyone swore to what they'd seen. No sword could stab through that skin, no fight fang tear it. Then all hands were hauled on deck by order of the king to restore Heorot to its former splendor, citizens resurrecting glamour blunted by gore. The golden threads in tapestries depicting scenes of sweeter times, distractions and gleaming designs, now hung haphazard in the ruined room. Reinforced as the walls had been, there was still wreckage, door hinges bent, braces broken. Only the ceiling remained uncracked. The intruder had fled first, afraid of expiring far from home. Death, no matter our desires, can't be distracted. We know this much is true. And it's true for all souls. Each of us will one day find the feast finished and, fattened or famished, step slowly back into their own dark hall for that final night of sleep. If you're catching up to this and you haven't listened to the first episode, there are passages here where clearly the monk who was transcribing this remembers that he's in a monastery and the abbot is going to want to know how he's been spending his time, and therefore has to very clumsily tie everything back to Jesus. In due time, the half-dinner's heir appeared. Tonight the king would dine triumphant at his own table, reclaimed from ruin. Never before had everyone shown up so festive, so fiery, to pay tribute to their bounty bringer. Every major man was there, pounding cups of mead. Even the king shouted for rounds, his nephew Hrothulf there beside him, spirits flowing, hearts glowing in Heorot Hall. Back then, remember, the shieldings were not yet inclined towards treachery, though things would change. Hrothgar gave his own father's sword to Beowulf, presented it formally, with it a helmet, mail shirt, and war banner, all precious property of his people. And Beowulf drank deeply, pleased and petted, fated to the utmost, gifts raining down upon him like pennies from heaven. The half-dinner's sword, the gold, the glitz, the rest of the hall soldiers watched it happen. I mean, personally, I've never seen anything like it. So many treasures sliding down the table, a battle dowry moved from man to man over ale, no less. No fighting, no fury. Nope, bro, this was a certain type of night. The golden helmet, for example, was ringed with ridges, wrapped in wire to tire any sword that sought the skull of a shield warrior occupied with other enemies. And now the king called for 8 steeds to be led into the hall, each in its own horse helmet, harnessed in gold, and one mare was buckled under Hrothgar's own saddle, the same saddle he used for swordplay, gem dripping, blinged out, brought forth only when the king himself was slain. That man, remember, was the first to fight in wartime, the first to kill, swinging before any of his boys could be slain. Ing's descendant dropped all these delights upon Beowulf, the weapons, the horses, ordering him to use them in health. Yeah, the Lord of Hera paid properly, tendered treasure for services rendered in blood. Anyone knows how fair it was, more than fair. And more than this even, the king bequeathed to each of the sea soldiers on Beowulf's bench. Every life brisker got a golden gift of his own, and the man who'd been assassinated by Grendel was vindicated in treasure. The invader would have murdered many more had God not gotten in the mix. One man's mettle kept the rest from massacre. You have to look at it this way and reconcile yourself. God's in charge, always has been, always will be, and anyone who lives long will endure both ecstasy and ugliness. It was an hour for singing then, and instruments were hauled out for the battle-bringing king, who called for harps, epics, and heroic histories. Helgeman, Hrothgar's poet, was ready with rhymes, spitting the saga of the sons of Finn, word-whipping his way into the fight in Friesland, the day the Danish king Hneif of the Shieldings fell to the lack of fealty. Hildebert had nothing tender to say about the Jutes and their loyalties. She'd surrendered son and brother here, her home hall become a brutal battlefield. Innocent of crime, yet cursed, captured, speared worse. Hoke's daughter was savaged by sorrow, grief-gutted. Who wouldn't weep as dawn drove few daggers deeper, the sun scoring her son's wounds, day breaking upon her dearest dead. They'd been her heart, her happiness, her hopes. War had wrung them ragged, dragged them to death across a court of sword-crossed kin. There was no fighting now. Finn had only lack left. He could not attack from here and battle to the end with Hengist. Though this had been his own hall, most of his men were dead. And what could Finn, the host, do to preserve the rest from their enemies? A truce was his only option. A partitioned hall, swords split in half. The Danes quartered in one portion, the Frisian throne and edifice now a shared territory. Daily he'd give gifts to both sides, his hands open as widely to Hengist and his men, unwillingly ruled over by their ring lord's reaper, as to his own men, the Frisians. They'd all be encouraged in encomiums, given hope with heirlooms. Everyone would be hostage to hall jollity, and beer would be drunk without cheering, both sides pacified by precious things. This then was the treaty. The agreement was sealed in gold, all former fighters guaranteed greed grace. It was sworn solemnly to Hengist by Finn, and any Frisian who broke it, who thought he might divide the room with whispered insults, raising recent wrath with snide ribbing, would be pricked. The sword's point would decide. The pyre was built, gold unhoarded, to properly mourn the Shieldings king, who slumbered on his death weald, awaiting warmth he'd never feel. The landscape was littered with reddened metal, mailcoats gored, links bent, boar-shaped helmets dented where swords had scraped skulls. Other bodies too of noble Danes unraveled by gaping wounds, traveling to journey's end. Hildebert sent her son to this last station at Hneif's shoulder, their sole vessels to be burnt together, family finally in flame. She raised her voice in mourning, keening for her kin as the pyre was lit. Smoke smothered her song, darkness made of skin and bone. These men who'd been tended by those who loved them were carcasses now, heads melted, wounds running, reopened for flame ravens. Fire comes from the same family as famine. It can feast unfulfilled forever. The dead of both nations were done. Glory days gone for good. The fighters fell away, finding families and forts across Friesland, visiting the living too long close-quartered with corpses. Hengist, though, boarded a wicked winter in Finn's hall, heart howling for his own king and hearth, the weather too wild to loosen his ship. For him the ice and snow were tinted red, and kept him clinging to a killing country. At last, as always happens, the season shifted to spring. Another year appeared, sunlight, green tendrils, the earth's bosom in bloom, a time for returning, the exiled yearning for home. But more than that, to get it done with, the avenging, without which Hengist would be unmanned. He itched to bring justice to Jutes. When Hunlafing lay a legendary sword in his lap, well, it was named Flame Fang for a reason. Any season is a season for blood if you look at it in the right light. The Jutes knew this blade already. They should have expected it to twist, to key their kingdom. Hengist only did what he had to do, tipped the pitches, spilt the ale, red rivers running under wooden benches. Finn fell when Guthlaf and Oslaf, hard henchmen, brought up the last winter's battle, blaming brutality on their bold host, and their grief on him too, the pain of their loss unquenched, the only remedy, blood balm. The shieldings washed the walls with rancor, slew Finn and all his men, and bore away his world queen. They ransacked the hall for hoard, grabbing all the treasure they could, golden collars, jewels. Onward then, over the sea and back to Denmark, they brought their woman, straight-spined, returning her to the country she'd come from. That dark entertainment was done. Words had won over wine long enough. Now laughter conquered conversation. Serving boys poured pleasure from pitchers. Workthio, weighted in gold, processed to her place between two good men, Hrothgar and his nephew Hrotholf, who back then yet trusted in the links of lineage. There too waited Unferth, at the feet of those men, the shielding lords, who trusted him too, perhaps not as much as they trusted themselves, but still a brave man, though a sibling slayer, brilliant though a brother breaker. The lady offered up all she had to trade. Accept this cup from me, my lord of rings, and lift this golden goblet. Give the Geats their due. Be good to them who've been good to you. Gifts are for granting, and your hands should be open, your heart happy, even as you remember, I know you do, the good men who gave kith gifts to you. Heorot's red walls have been whitewashed, purged of horror, and I hear you've chosen a brand new son, this Cain-cleansing warrior. I know you know that life is short, that you are mortal. The blessings you bask in today are boons for bequeathing. I ask only that you gift the kingdom to your kin before your sword is sheathed in smoke. I know your nephew Hrothulf well, his noble blood, his moral code. He'll serve our sons and raise them right. I trust he'll treat them sweetly if you should die before he does, repaying our kindness with son safety. We took him in when his father died, and if he recalls it at all, he knows how to behave. We gave the orphan everything, made him one of our brave men when he'd have been alone. She bent then to her boy's bench, where Hrethric and Hrothmund sat, with all the young sons of chieftains. There too was a grown man, good, great Beowulf the Gate, positioned between them. She brought him the cup. She called him friend. She gave him gold. Her will was wrought in rings. She offered armlets, garments, a neck ring, a collar larger than any I've ever seen, heavy as heaven is light, and all of it brighter and better than any hoard since Hamas, who himself hooked the flaming throat chain of the Brisings, those amber god reins, and trekked it back to his own fortress. fleeing Ermenric's treachery and securing his soul with Goldgar. And later, hear it, Hierlach the Gate, Swerting's nephew, would be the final owner. In his last battle, beneath banners, he'd hold to his horde, fighting furiously, shackled to this sparkling string, this precious, poisonous thing. Fate would fell him and his prideful priorities, the Frisians following his fuel, and he, in heavy armor, gem-governed, would be slain. He'd worn that same sparkle when he crossed the sea group, but even champagne goes flat. His bling would go to Frankish kings, from plundered breastplate to that famous throat chain, and lowlier warriors would gloat over the goners, getting what gold they could from Geert corpses, a field full of the forgotten. The hall thundered with handclaps. Welkthio went on with her gift-giving, thus witnessed. Take this golden collar, dear Beowulf. May it keep your head on straight. Wear this mail shirt, too, a treasure of my people. May it protect your heart. Guide my 2 sons, guard them, keep them as they are tonight, and I will keep you as you are, draped in delights. You're famous here, and long after your lifetime you'll be known, your story sweeping as the sea, shores born into being by waves of words. My prince, may you be blessed by this bounty. Keep my sons close, treat them as we treat one another here in Herod, tenderly, trustingly, loyally. No one conspires to hurt, only to hold fast with brothers. Believe me, Beowulf, my thane's wishes align with mine. The sole desire of those drinking here is to do my bidding when it comes to you. She settled into her seat. Wine waterfalled into men's mouths. It was a banquet unmatched in munificence. After all, they had no foretelling of fate's fixed plans. A shadow stretched over sweetness, formless and fatal. Night fell, and Hrothgar readied himself for rest, his quarters calling him to sleep. Men stood guard, as they always had. The floor that bristled with benches became a swan road, white waves of bolster and feathers. And though one of those drinkers turned dreamers was doomed, he didn't know it. The Geert's shields served as shining headboards, and on each bench was arranged a helmet, hulking, a mail shirt with rings like linked fingers, and a splinterless spear, tree-sleek, ready for wrath any time, to be brought into play without notice, as was the habit of their homeland and war wanderings. They were ready to wreak havoc any time, any place. Their lord was a lucky lord. The Geerts were hardcore, but even Geerts need sleep, so sleep swept them away. One dreamer would die dreaming. This was nothing new, given Grendel's former residence in the Golden Hall, but his eviction had made evil dwindle in the minds of the defenders. That story, they thought, was over. There was another chapter. An avenger lay in wait, counting sworded seconds until the latest hour, her heart full of hatred. Grendel's mother, warrior woman, outlaw, meditated on her misery. She lived ill-fated, sinking beneath cold currents to her kingdom undercountry. Her line linked to extinction since Cain crossed swords with Abel and fled murder-marked to make his home in wastelands, solitary and silent. From Cain came more misery, a legacy of lost souls. Grendel was one of those, banished and blasted. He'd found a waker among the dreamers, a battle amid the beds, and wrestled the warrior who'd woken into war. Beowulf saw himself as God's gift, Grendel as a goner. He used his strength to slay the intruder, trusting in his father to protect him, as he always had. He bled the Hellion, and Grendel fled piecemeal. No heaven for him, no honey, only rushing through a haunted hall to die in his own mausoleum. Now his mother was here, carried on a wave of wrath, crazed with sorrow, looking for someone to slay, someone to pay in pain for her heart's loss. She found the path and made her way to Heorot. Ringdanes were dreaming there, a murdering herd of sleepers, drooling, drunk, the feast filling them. They were the cream of the crop, but soon they'd be chaff, scythed from swordsmen into skeletons. She was the one to do it. The horror wasn't muted by the measure of women's strength against men's brawn. Both can hold slaying swords, glazed with gore, and score the boar crests from war helmets, warming them with blood. In Heorot Hall, hard-honed blades were yanked from over benches, shields shouldered to cover blinking sleepers, waking bareheaded, bare-chested, stunned by her arrival. She moved swiftly, knowing she had only moments to sift men for her vengeance and remain among the living. She tore a warrior from his bed and dragged him defenseless to her fen. This was Hrothgar's best friend, most adored on the land between the two salt seas, warrior and retainer. She slew him sleeping. Beowulf was lucky, bedded elsewhere. After the brawl, gift quarters had been appointed him like rings. The Geat was asleep when Grendel's mother struck, and Heorot Hall howled. She'd taken their trophy too, Grendel's hand. Man by man they squalled. This was unjust, a bad bargain that both sides should suffer losses, though the war was dealt and done, themselves the clear winners. The wise king, grey and battle brittle, moaned when he heard the news that his closest adviser, nearest to ear, was no more, Dornale dead. Beowulf, blood-blessed boy, was hauled from sleep, hustled hungover to the king's bedside. Boot to boot with his band, he marched to the room where Hrothgar waited, grim and gloomy, wondering if his fate was fucked forever. The Almighty refusing to relent. Beowulf and his boys threw the doors open to sunlight and rattled the floorboards, no ground given to grief. Beowulf thundered up to the morose prince and asked, "Had Hrothgar slept well?" Hrothgar had no words. He said some anyway. Don't speak to me of happiness. Hard times have come again. The Danes are in darkness. Aesir is murdered. Ermenlav's big brother and my best friend. My battle broke when ranks were closing and boar helms bashed into brain pans. He was there, hand to my heart, a man like no other, terror-tested, never bested until tonight, when a slaughterer withdrew him and spirited him from Heorot. Where is she? Who knows? Glutting on gobbets after murdering him unopposed. This is on you. She threw herself into a blood feud after you slew her son Grendel last night, tore him and bore him into the afterlife, never mind years of his own crimes. You gripped him, held him, and he lost the fight, fell to the mat, and died. He's followed by another now, an evil intruder, his mother, fueled by fury, a woman seeking vengeance for her son. She goes too far, even as a soldier might in avenging his king, grieving the loss of his ring giver. That hand which once stretched wide, filled with golden gifts, now still and cold. Well, I've heard my people, those simple citizens who live out in the muddy country, say they've seen the two together, roaming the moor, wading the mere heath rambling and of a height. One is, as far as they can tell, a woman, and the other misshapen, formed like a man, but larger than any man has a right to be. He was named Grendel, a fatherless son. Who knows whether he had other kin? He was a sin walker, is all they said. Those who've talked to me of these things. They say the two stalked the hillsides, the concealed country. They denned with wolves and dove in windy rivers, slipped like mist fish into the fen and threw it down into the darkest places underwater and underground, cliff-bound. It's not far from here, the mare, but it's a world away. A forest frosted even in green months, old wood, wicked and well-rooted. Water reflects trees like tangled teeth, a gaping maw that at night is lit with flames in the flood. No one's ever touched the bottom. No one born of man, anyway. Men can't go in. Even animals, a heath-hopping hart, held to Mere's edges by hounds, would sooner spin on hooves and fight, lower horns, and ready itself for death, than step upon that stinking sod and dive into the dark. That is a bad place. Waves roil and taste the sky's edge. Winds gust, clouds spit and spark, and when it storms, Mere mixes with mist, gazes up, and heaven moans. I'll say it again. This is on you. Everything depends on a boy who knows nothing of this terror, not least what you might feel when you get there, the nerves that might make you quake in horror's homestead. Go in, if you dare. I'll pay in gold, old and new, heirlooms and holdings lately wrought, if only you return, having done it. Beowulf, son of Echthel, was open for business. No worries, wise one, I've got this. When a friend needs to be avenged, it's better to fight than cry. Even when mourning, this is how it goes. We're all going to die, but most of us won't go out in glory. Here's what matters, though, for men, not living, but living on in legend. I'm not afraid. Stand up, protector of this place, and let us go together, following Grendel's mother's tracks. I give you my fist. She won't get away from Beowulf. He has no asylum, no cleavage cracks in Mother Earth, no tree barrow, no ocean I can't find her in, wherever she hides. Live through today, Hrothgar. It's the end of your miseries. Be as brave as your shopes say you are. The old king stood and thanked God, mighty as ever, for the promises of this prince. A horse was bridled for Hrothgar, its mane knitted into war braids, and the wise one, master of many, mounted his sparkling steed, his status visible for miles. His army followed on foot, shields raised, pacing murderers' tracks, leaving their own uncovered. They had no need to hide their hunting from her. She'd gone overland, straight through the dark, carrying the corpse of the comrade she'd killed. Best beloved, right-hand man. Second set of eyes for Hrothgar. The descendants of chieftains rode over razor-edged rocks, through perilous passageways, places off-map, paths too slender for company, where sea monsters sang and cliffs called for suicides. Hrothgar took the front, his crew behind him, examining her tracks, unhappily imagining the path ahead. Finally, the trees leaned longingly towards the stones, their needles bending as if to break. A grove of ghosts. There was the mare, water welling up like something wound-wrung, red as blood. Though they'd known their man was dead, they suffered afresh to discover in the mare a dark gift. There, at cliff's edge, lay Aisha's head. The company stared as water boiled with blood and bones. A war horn sounded over and over, but the soldiers sagged and sat down. The mare was full of monsters, too many to mention. Serpentine salt dragons, lizards in lethargy lying on stones. The kind of creatures that surface seething in ships' wakes to bare teeth and twist about an oar, foil fishers and bring bad omens to sailors. The beast dove, furious and frightened at the noise, the bugle and battler's shouts, the shrillness of seekers in their secret space. Agate drew his bow and struck a sleuthering one. An arrow piercing its scales, it struggled and thrashed in the water. The other men, invigorated, sought to join the killing. A second shot, a third, and then they slung themselves into the shallows and speared it. This monster they could control. They cornered it, clubbed it, tugged it onto the rocks, stillbirthed it from its mare mother, deemed it damned, and made of it a miscarriage. They examined its entrails, awed and aggrieved. Meanwhile, Beowulf gave 0 shits. He dressed himself in glittering gear, his mail shirt finely forged, links locked and loaded. He'd meet this murdering mother under Mare and amend her existence. Even if she tried to smother him, his bone cage would stay intact. No weakness here. His helmet, bright against the bleak backdrop, would save his skull from the watery substrate, from the black mud and curious currents. Hammered gold for a glamour god, made by one long gone. Jewels and boar-shaped ornaments imbued by the smith with power to keep other men from dying. No battle teeth could test it. No sword sliced that shine. Gold is good. Last, but not least, Unferth, Hrothgar's left-hand man, unexpectedly stand for Beowulf and handed him his heirloom, Hrunting, an ancient hilted sword written with runes of ruin, iron blade emblazoned with poisoned shoots, each bud reddened with enemy blood. In war, it never failed to score flesh, had never been wrested from the fist of him who held it. It was a sublime soldier's sword, meant to limb enemies, and this wasn't the first time it urged a hero to perform a feat. Unferth sent the sword to the more skillful swordsman. Note, the stone-bald son of Edglaff had been blackout drunk when he'd said that stuff he'd said, the rant he'd decanted into Beowulf's ear. He wasn't man enough to dive into rotten depths seeking someone so savage. He'd forgotten it now. He sought not to risk his skin, so surrendered his chance at fame. Why sign up for endless night when another man is armored, able, and ready to fight? Beowulf, Ecgtheow's son, laid out his plan. My man, king of wisdom, ring-bringer, I'm about to dive deep. Keep those words in mind, the pledge we exchanged, that dearly done deal. To recap, you, Halfdan's brother, Halfdan's son, said that I'm your son now, adopted and owned, that if I died in this dive, you'd father me to a further shore. In short, I end up dead, you pay my call, feed them, pour them meat. Also, adored Hrothgar, you swore you'd send Helak, my gold get, array for my get lord the treasures I won, and show him what keys this kingdom's deeded me. What a generous giver you are, and what a son I was to you while I lived. And Unferth, to that soldier I bequeath my father-forged heirloom, my wave-winging warblade. I'll gain fame with his Hrunting, or be harvested by hell. The Prince of Weathergates was done standing on ceremony. He stepped to the mare's edge and dove like a stone, thrown not to skip, but to wait a ship-shrouded corpse. Darkness drew him down. Most of a day was done before he could see the contours of the bottom. She who'd ruled these floodlands proudly for 100 seasons, ferocious, tenacious, rapacious, yes, she felt his presence in her realm, and knew a man from above was invading the below. She swam and seized him, but his body was swathed, war helm, war shirt, and she couldn't peel the mail off to reveal his dread fate, nor impale him on fingernails. She dragged him through dregs instead. The sea wolf slung the soldier out of the abyss and into her hall. He was too tightly held to wield his sword, no matter how he wished to war against her. As she swam, a shoal came seeking to school him, a scrimshaw selection of sea monsters rising out of the dark, tunneling with tooth and tusk, spearing and jeering. Sharks, seals, squealing beasts boring through the bog, biting at his battle shirt. The warrior squinted in the shadows and made out the domed walls of the hall, damming back the dammed waters, the mere made sere by engineering. He saw the glow of a fire, a brilliant light flaming up and flaring, and then at last he saw her, the reclusive night queen, the mighty mere wife. Fearless, he heaved his sword to take her life, swinging with all his strength so the edge rang against her skull. But it was to no avail. His war torch was dimmed, his blood boldness gone. She was impervious to his blade. The sword had failed him, though it had served many worthy soldiers, skinned many adversaries, slicing armor, hacking helmets into hash. This was the first time the heirloom hadn't overwhelmed an enemy. Hilak's heir was bent on blood, thinking of legacy, of legend. He hurled the sword, useless hoard guilt. Let it shatter in the silt. He'd fight like a man and take her hand to hand, his fingertips blueprinting her skin. This is what real men must do. Come on, we all know the truth. If you want to win, you have to forget you're afraid to die. The Geat was ready to rumble, pissed now. He roared a challenge, warmed for war with Grendel's mother, twisting her hair around his fist, raging, swinging her by her own skin, flinging her to crash against the kingdom she'd reigned over. He rose again, relentless, and turned on him, gripping and flipping him. The pugilist panicked. His certainty crumbling, he took flight and fell. He began, sick-hearted, to hear his death knell, his sure feet fumbling, his fight spirit fugitive. She bent over his breast, held the Hall invader hard to the stones, and drew a long knife. The mere wife meant to avenge her son, her sole heir. But Beowulf's mail shielded him, his shoulder safe in the slarite of some smith's genius, link staying locked to bend her blade. Ecgtheow's heir would have been filleted, recategorized as MIA and left to rot in her cavern, had not this suit saved him. That too was God's work. The Lord, maker of miracles, sky designer, had no trouble leveling the playing field when Beowulf beat the Count and stood. He glimpsed it hanging in her hall, that armory of heirlooms, somebody's birthright. A sword, blessed by blood and flood, ancient, dating from the dawn of things, so tremendous only a hero could heft it, though all would envy it. Beowulf gripped the giant's sword at the hilt, and then he, the shielding's main man, in desperation, not expecting to exist after this night, flung it at his enemy with all his might. It was enough. He cleaved her spine. Those bone rings given by God were bitten through, the house of her head raided as her hall had been. She bent as though praying and was spent, sinking to the stones. The sword sweated red. The swordsman regretted nothing. The light was strong now, a brilliance like flame and tallow meeting in a sky sick of sleep. And Beowulf took the volume of the vault, itemizing everything. His sword held high as defense against any other awfulness that sought him here. Hilak's hitman had more in mind. He sought to repay Grendel for his wrath, for every night he'd spent ravening, not just the first evening he'd come to Heorot, helping himself to 15 Danes and holding another 15 hostage, dragging them from home into horrors. Against the far wall, our hero found Grendel, still as a sleeper, war-riven, a cadaver cold and collapsed, heartless after his time in Heorot. Beowulf desecrated the dead, swinging the sword again and again and rending the flesh, a heft, a wrench, removing Grendel's head. Above, Hrothgar's men surrounded them here, holding the fort as best they could. Suddenly, they saw the waters boil with blood, a roiling of gore, salt, and sorrow. and they lowered silver heads. Oh no, said the old men, tightly packed around their prince. That was a sad day. They wept for lost wishes, sure they'd never see Beowulf again, let alone witness him in triumph, presenting his kill to their king. The sea wolf had savaged him, everyone agreed. And it was lunchtime. The brave shieldings forsook the cliff top and took their gold river giver home. But the visiting Geats, now vagrant, stayed, hopeless, heartsick, staring into the churning mere, yearning against all evidence for their lord to reappear. Below, in Beowulf's hands, the slaying sword began to melt like ice, just as the world thaws in May when the father unlocks the shackles that have chained frost to the climate, and releases hostage heat, uses sway over seasons to uncage his prisoner Spring and let her stumble into the sun. The Geats' glory got nothing else from that estate, though he eyeballed the treasures Grendel's mother had collected. He took only head and hilt, jewel-scabbed salvaged gift. The blade itself had bled out, the inscriptions on it smeared to smut. So scathing was the blood of the slain stranger. It was done. The man who'd made it through alive, survivor of his enemy's annihilation, swam as fast as he could swim, undoing his dark dive. The mare ran clear and pure now. The ruler of the deep had unclasped her hand from ephemeral existence, letting loose her life. He surfaced at last, the hardy-hearted captain, swimming to shore, reveling in the heft of his hoard, the sea chest he carried. Stunned, his men ran to meet him, thanking all that was holy, his loyal entourage rejoicing, shouting that he was risen, their lord, their leader, their all. They undressed him, freeing him of his armor, letting him breathe air instead of water. The mare was peaceful now, though battle paint, reflecting the cloudy sky above. Hearts singing with love, they returned from strangers' country by twisted trails, lapping the earth with strides onto known roads, safe roads. The boldest men among them carried Grendel's head, a hard task, heaving it onto the heath from over sea cliffs. Those men were major, massive, and committed. 4 brave warriors paired off to bear the gore horde, a skull spitted on a spear litter. They approached Heorot together, celebrating as they went, 14 ferocious, war-worked Geats, trampling down the meadow, Beowulf among them, blending into his brothers, matching step for step. That leader of men entered the hall a hero and made his way to Hrothgar, grit-written. His crew dragged Grendel's head into the mead hall where a meal was being served, and a host of lesser men carried cups to mouths. In their midst was the queen of the house, their hoard, their treasure. The Danes stared, jaws dropped. Beowulf made a speech to end all speeches, that son of Ecgtheow. So, we're back from the brink. Halfdan's son, shielding savior, bringing you this token of our esteem. Sea booty, gore loot, no big whoop. Here's to glory. And now, my story. I don't mean to say this shit was no thing. I lived through your basic fist fight underwater, a tryst with destruction. I did the deed you deemed necessary, but I'd be bluffing if I didn't say I would have died had God not kept me close. Though my sword seemed severe, I'd have been helpless had I only fronting. Hardcore as it is, it failed when I brought it to battle. God gave me grace. He sometimes saves the solitary. On a ledge glowed another blade, marvelous enough to mend the mistake I'd made trying to take on Grendel's mother in her own lair lake. Speed was my only advantage, solo as I was. I snatched the sword, striking down the bitch that sought to slay me, scoring the other two, her son. The blade blistered as it touched their blood, and rivers of red rushed over it, unforging it from Firefang into what you see here, a bladeless hilt. I brought it from below, having avenged the Dane's death. That's all I need to say. except that I promise you and every nobleman here, your sleep is safe now. Your corps can defend you, whether brave boys or bold men. You need not worry for their lives or longevity, Lord of Shieldings, nor fear anyone surging up from the mere. We're done with that damage.
Rory!
Thanks.
That was ace.
So good. And then everything was fine from then on after. And nothing bad ever happened again.
Hi, Ash.
What's up, little man?
Just as you finished, Ash went.
With his mouth.
Yeah, with his mouth. He's been practicing raspberries.
I'm sure you've been giving him lots of good examples.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Excellent.
Very important skill.
Yeah.
Waiting little captain.
Those little squeaks and shrieks are my favorite thing.
And I'll unmute.
Yay!
I do like the kids' sounds. They're quite sweet. I also like that I have Fiona underneath Rory right now, and the color juxtaposition is really satisfying.
I think this is the most commitment to costume we've had at not a finale.
Yeah, well, I had to bring like the monster wife energy. Like, I know we were talking about how, you know, maybe she's been miscast in previous translations, but like, gotta respect the scary monster wife.
Mm-hmm. I've always really loved the imagery of like an underwater meat hall that is like just functional, but through magic. The idea of it just being in the middle of this like silty fucking bog. And like the idea of it just being so like choking and oppressive.
Like the bad part of my brain that I couldn't turn off was like, is Grendel Aquaman?
Okay. New Beowulf remake where Jason Momoa plays all the characters.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, I'm in.
Also, it's entirely filmed like in his house with like all the props are just things he's found in his house.
Was the like random story within a story, is that going to be relevant later on, or did they just decide there's enough story here?
So I think there's a few different schools about it. One is just that like this monk was just cribbing together bits of text that like he didn't have anywhere else to put it, but he knew that it should probably be transcribed. But you can also make the case that there was like a thematic resonance and kind of foreshadowing of like him talking about this grieving mother in this like song, and then them like the dramatic irony that they are unaware of Grendel's mother about to seek vengeance, that like it's kind of happening in parallel. Like if you were doing this as a movie but not that one, not the Ray Winston Angelina Jolie one, then you could have like the bard describing the like grief of this mother that is like in a sympathetic light, right, of like this woman's humanity and her grief and the loss, while having that while overlaid with the imagery of Grendel's mother weeping over her child dying, like being murdered. Do you know what I mean? Like it's an interesting juxtaposition.
I love Storytime book club.
Yeah.
Speaking of Storytime Book Club, Lily, do you want to say anything about Storytime Book Club?
I was just about to. Yeah, so for anyone who got a copy of Shades of Grey, on Friday we're meeting for the first time. There's a post in the group with where to read up until in the comments because Andy divided it up. For this first meeting, we're going to do Friday at normal Storytime time, but ongoing afterwards, we're probably going to pick a little bit earlier and not a Friday night as things are opening up again. It just was the most convenient first date. So yeah, if you can't make it to this one, that's okay. You can always catch up in time for the next one if you're interested in reading the book. It's not 50 Shades of Grey. It is the Shades of Grey that Frankie read a sample of at the Storytime finale. So if you want to get a bit of a taste of what it's like, go back and watch that video and have some feelings.
Can I give a minor spoiler, which is something I would have wanted to know before reading it?
Yes.
It is the first book in a trilogy, and it reads, it doesn't all resolve at the end in a satisfactory fashion like a standalone novel would do. So just be emotionally prepared for that.
Thank you. That is very good to know, and I did not know that. So yeah, come read some weird sci-fi stuff about colors and stuff. I don't really know that much about the book other than what Frankie read us. It sounded good though, and lots of us wanted to read it, so now we're doing that.
Oh yeah. So before we finish recording, is there any other like housekeeping for the catch-up crew?
Saturday, we are leaning into the fact that every time we do poetry time, someone goes, "Oh, that just reminded me of this really cool poem." So we're doing poetry association. So we'll start with something, and then someone else will read something, and then we will see how many themes we cover in the time. Nothing strict, like could be the same poet, could be like use of words, could be just like the rhythm reminded you of that other thing. So yeah, that's Saturday.
Like, oh, hey, both of these poems say the word sun in it more than one time. And I really like this poem that I've been waiting for an excuse to read. So like, feel free to just bring a poem that you really like and then wait for a loose connection.
Yeah, definitely. I think the only thing I would say is let's try and have a different connection like each time, even if there are obviously multiple themes that will come up multiple times. Probably like the moon and love and feminism.
So what you're saying is let's not get trapped in another hour of love poems?
Yes. Or let's do that, but like pretend it's because it had the word ocean in it.
Okay. Yeah, if you want to do a theme that's been done before, you have to find a more tenuous link.
I like that.
Yeah.
Cool. And yeah, if anyone feels like coming, Saturdays is when Closest Embrace is shifted to. We're doing every 2 weeks, so we are on this Saturday, but not next Saturday. Yeah, if anyone has things on their mind that they feel like talking about and hanging out with folks, or he's just like had some tough mental health stuff going on but doesn't want to talk and just wants to exist around other people who get that sometimes shit happens and you just want to exist around other people and feel not okay, you can also do that. So hit me up if you want any details about that.
Thanks. I think that's everything, because then next week is 3 more days of Beowulf.
Yeah. Oh, and we'll update the Storytime spreadsheet with dates. So if you have anything else you want to read after Beowulf, sign up.
Ainsley is signed up to do some. It's a cool. I think it might be along a similar theme. Is it a cool translation or a cool version of something?
Is she doing the Penelope-oid thing?
I wasn't sure if she was doing that or if she was going to read a chunk of a catalog of Unabashed Gratitude by Ross Gay. Her and I talked about her doing that. It's like a half-hour long poem that's beautiful and full of animals and a bit of a story and takes you on a wild ride.
Cool.
Yeah, but we will keep everyone up to date when we have looked at the sheet. But yeah, we're good for the next fortnight, I think. And then after that, we will see.
Cool. Rory, do you have any departing wisdom for us?
Sure, catch-up crew. May you always have an absurdly ready supply of swords at any given moment.
May you be as overconfident as Beowulf in your own abilities.
Exactly.
May you, for some reason, punch a lot of sharks.
And survive. That part's important, I think.
I love the inclusion of seals in there when they're describing all the terrifying monsters on the bed of the lake.
To be fair, seals do bite like cats when you corner them. So
On that note, don't corner any seals, catch up crew.
Uh-huh.
Bye. We love you.
Bye.